The Anthrax dragnet. Investigators say they're closing in on the location where 2 anthrax letters may have been mailed. And there are 2 new cases of the disease at a New Jersey post office and at CBS News in New York. U.S. forces say they're hitting their targets in Afghanistan, but can they break up the Taliban? And Eye on America, a new challenge for the Postal Service, protecting their workers and you.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. 2 more cases of anthrax were confirmed today, both of them women. One works in a New Jersey post office that handled 2 letters containing anthrax. The other works in my office as my assistant here at CBS News in New York. Both women contracted skin anthrax. Both are being treated and doing well. The source of the anthrax at CBS has not been determined, but we are now the 3rd major television network news organization to be targeted, and it brings to 6 the number of people diagnosed with anthrax this month. As for who may be behind all this, CBS's Jim Stewart has the latest tonight on the investigation.
More and more, all of the recent anthrax outbreaks are starting to look like the work of the same person or persons. Investigators now say the same type of anthrax spore seen in the first case discovered in Florida was also in the letter sent to NBC headquarters and the one sent to Senator Daschle. Tests are still being conducted on the type spore used in other cases, including the one today at CBS News. And say officials, upon further examination, the spores don't look to be as high grade as first thought.
It looked to be run-of-the-mill. They're sensitive to all antibiotics.
Those discoveries led officials to try to put the anthrax threat in perspective by laying out all the numbers. Thus far, the FBI has responded to 2,500 suspected anthrax threats across the country, but has actually found the bacteria in only 3 locations: Boca Raton, Florida, Washington, D.C., and the New York, New Jersey area. And although 4,000 people have been tested, just 36 were found to be exposed but disease-free. Only 6 others were actually infected, one of whom died. Meanwhile, the FBI and Postal Service announced a $1 million reward for whoever mailed the letters.
The mailing of anthrax is a terrorist act. It is a terrorist act.
And sources say investigators have narrowed it down to 2 post offices in the Trenton, New Jersey area the letters were mailed from, and are fanning out to all the street mailboxes nearby, on the assumption that the suspect may have dosed himself preventively with antibiotics. They're also checking pharmacies in the area for purchases in mid-September. And although they have no definite evidence one way or the other, investigators still can't shake the belief that this may turn out to be a domestic criminal, perhaps acting alone. As one official speculated, think the Unabomber with anthrax. Dan?
Jim Stewart reporting live from Washington. As for the newest cases of anthrax, the 2 women diagnosed today, CBS News correspondent Richard Schlesinger has that part of the story for you.
This time, the attention focused on a member of the CBS Evening News staff. She was diagnosed with the less serious skin form of the disease and is expected to make a full recovery. Unlike previous cases where authorities identified actual letters contaminated with anthrax, so far no letter has been discovered here. But investigators say this attack probably took place around the time NBC and ABC News were also contaminated.
The pattern here appears to be essentially identical to the pattern in the other 2 news organizations, and by all intents and purposes happened sometime in late September.
Outside Trenton at the postal facility that handled contaminated letters sent to NBC and Senator Tom Daschle, one worker was diagnosed with anthrax and another tested positive for exposure to the disease. Who's behind the attacks? Former FBI agent Rick Smith says whoever it is knows more about how to make people scared than how to make them sick.
If you had the ability to contaminate 1 million people, you would do it. If you don't have that ability, you would send letters to Congress and the media to get the most reaction, the most bang for your buck.
The reaction is far more widespread than the disease, and officials are spending as much time urging people to calm down as they are discussing details of the latest outbreak.
People should just not overreact to this. They should just, I know it's hard to say this, but you got to keep saying it, that is to relax and deal with it, work with it.
Well, it's easier to work with the threat of anthrax now than it was just a few days ago. The evening news worked out of this studio all day. We were never told to evacuate because officials now have more experience with the disease than they did before, when other newsrooms were emptied after anthrax was discovered. Dan?
Richard Schlesinger, thanks. On Capitol Hill, the main buildings and hearing rooms were closed today for anthrax testing. It was standing room only as senators tried to conduct businesses in tiny offices. House members adjourned yesterday. They'll be gone for nearly a week. And Minority Leader Dick Gephardt told CBS's Bob Schieffer today it may be a while before any of the members get all the offices reopened.
It'll take some weeks. This is a major job to decontaminate. They may have to decontaminate the part of the ventilation system. That's hard to do.
You and other House leaders have taken some real heat today in several newspapers around the country for deciding to adjourn yesterday. Are you still convinced you did the right thing?
I'm confident we did the right thing. They could have never started these tests if we hadn't gotten the people out of the buildings.
Dick Gephardt with Bob Schieffer. Tests on more than 900 Capitol Hill staffers have turned up no new anthrax exposures beyond the 31 Senate employees previously identified as exposed but not infected with the disease. Like Congress, federal health officials have come under some criticism for keeping too low a profile and not doing enough to clear up confusion and keep the public informed. CBS News medical correspondent Elizabeth Caledon reports tonight how public health officials are now moving to address that.
A critical thing for about 40 doctors at UCLA's Children's Hospital took a break from busy rounds this afternoon to get a quick lesson on how to find anthrax.
We can all be experts in it in a pretty short period of time, and you will be before this broadcast is over.
These are stressful days for the nation's physicians. They are being interrogated about signs, symptoms, contagion, and treatment of a disease few know anything about.
And it's not something we commonly see. It's not something most physicians ever see in a lifetime.
This is the first time since anthrax appeared in Florida that the Centers for Disease Control has issued any type of guidance to the nation's doctors.
Should I order that extra laboratory test, as unlikely as it might be?
The agency's silence has been a concern even for former employees watching the crisis unfold.
We all are concerned about the lack of certain information that we'd like to have more immediate.
Today's unusual video conference is an effort to streamline information and give doctors the right diagnostic tools.
You know, you can always say do it sooner, do it later, but if you're not providing adequate amount of information for people to act on, and your information is preliminary and incomplete, it's a question of what is most useful to people, and we think what we're providing today will be most useful to practicing doctors.
The seminar focused on detecting the bacteria and finding early symptoms. Doctors were advised to be suspicious, test for anthrax, and report to public health officials.
But it is detectable, diagnosable, treatable, and doesn't spread person to person.
The hope is today's video conference will change the sense that the government is not organized and that doctors don't know what to do. More conferences are planned as the medical community's level of experience with anthrax grows. Dan?
Elizabeth Caledon, thanks. The new Director of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, said today the government is seeking to acquire 300 million doses of smallpox vaccine. He did not say how long that might take. He did say the Public Health Service would decide the health risks versus the benefits of giving the vaccine. About air travel security, Ridge sided with House Republican leaders who oppose federalizing airport security workers.